Don't settle for bad socks. Get comfort and grip at an affordable price with Pure Grip Socks Pro. Choose from 18 different colors at puregripsocks.com.
The Adidas X lineup for 2023 is different this year in the sense that there are 3 top-end options. Where historically there's been a 0.1 with laces and a plus model without them, this year the 0.1s come in both laceless and laced variations, with the Crazyfast Plus now featuring a lacing system, but also an entirely different ultra lightweight upper. Where if you're into the laceless thing, going for the laceless model is the obvious choice, and honestly it's one of their better laceless speed boots. However, if you would rather have laces for the adjustability and lockdown that comes along with it, you now have 2 options. And as I'm sure many of you have noticed, most pro footballers are gravitating towards the cheaper 0.1 variation rather than the ultra lightweight plus. Why is that? I'll do my best to answer that question as we compare the Crazyfast.1 and Crazyfast Plus, determining what the differences really are and helping you decide which one might be best for you. And really quickly, before we get started, if you enjoy these comparisons, find them helpful and informative, don't forget to drop a like on the video and make sure you subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, so you don't miss out on my reviews of all the latest football boots of 2023. While pricing isn't really a factor when talking about the objective performance characteristics of a football boot, it is a factor when picking between these two, in that neither of them are cheap. However, one is more expensive than the other. The Crazyfast 0.1 is going to run you $260 at full retail, while the Crazyfast Plus is basically the most expensive top-end model from the big 3 brands, bearing a retail price of $300. That's $40 more for a pair of football boots that definitely aren't going to make you play better, but do definitely have some differences when it comes to fit and feel. Both of which, by the way, you can get below their normal retail prices by way of some exclusive SR4U coupon codes by checking out the links down below. With one of the main physical differences between these 2 boots being the construction of the upper, where on the Crazyfast 0.1 you're going to find a thin textile synthetic that's very pliable, does have some structure to it, and of course gives you that one-piece enclosure across the top of the foot, kind of being filled in by that elasticated prime knit material, as we've seen from the Adidas X series for the last couple generations, where the Crazyfast Plus features a more traditional U-throat construction with a central lacing system, a standalone tongue, and an upper that is also textile based, but as you can see, is basically translucent. It's even thinner, even more pliable, and maybe a little bit less structured overall, kind of trending more towards what Adidas used to do in the F50 Adizero days versus, of course, the more modern era of their speed boots in the X series. From a touch perspective, while the upper of the Crazyfast Plus is definitely thinner, unless you had these on your right foot and the 0.1 on your left foot, it'd be really difficult to tell a difference between the 2. Both offer no extra padding, both have a good level of pliability to them, and the surface texture is the same on both boots as well, so grip levels aren't really any different. If you just want the thinnest possible touch, then yeah, you might prefer the Crazyfast Plus, but like I said, the difference is minimal. What I will say is more noticeable in terms of the feel and performance characteristics of the upper is that the Crazyfast Plus upper is a little bit more pliable, which you might find more comfortable, but as a trade-off, it's less structured than what you're gonna find on the 0.1, which means if you like that super locked-in responsive sensation, I'd make the argument that the Crazyfast 0.1 feels more responsive and secure than the Crazyfast Plus. But realistically, the differences in the uppers are fairly minimal. What I think is going to be the deciding factor for most people is going to be the lacing systems themselves, the more traditional U-throat construction of the Crazyfast Plus versus the one-piece upper construction of the Crazyfast 0.1, which I think is part of the reason why so many pro footballers are not wearing this more premium ultra lightweight plus variation. The Adidas X line has been running with this one-piece upper enclosure with a very similar lacing setup for the last several generations of their Adidas X speed boots, and because so many players have adopted this design concept and have been wearing it, as I talked about recently in a video comparing the retail version of the Crazyfast 0.1 to the version Messi actually wears, a lot of pro footballers appreciate consistency. While it's cool and exciting to try out new products, they ultimately want something that feels familiar and comfortable on their feet. And because so many guys have been wearing this type of construction on the upper of their football boots for a number of years, it's going to be really difficult in one generation cycle to just have them switch back to something that is, I guess by today's standards, a little bit more old school. In other words, personal preference and familiarity are going to be a huge factor in picking between these two football boots. And when you're talking about a younger demographic of pro footballers, where most of them at this point have been wearing football boots with a one-piece upper construction for the majority of their careers, again, it's kind of difficult to have them almost turn back the clock and go for something that is perceived as being more traditional in the U-throat construction and central lacing system of the Crazyfast Plus. Between the two, personally, I much prefer this traditional construction. It reminds me so much of the F50 Adizero days, football boots that I was quite fond of. But again, I totally understand why there are going to be plenty of people out there, including pros, that prefer the one-piece construction of the 0.1 variation. Another minor difference between these two boots is going to be the construction in the heel, where obviously both are still low cut, but you do have a little bit more traditional shaping in the Crazyfast Plus. Ultimately, I think both are comfortable, both are shaped very similarly, and the general lockdown is not an issue with either of these boots. Again, I tend to prefer the fit and feel of the heel area on the Crazyfast Plus, but I definitely think both are passable in terms of what you should expect from a pair of high-end football boots. When it comes to sole plates and stud patterns, there is no difference between these two whatsoever. It's the exact same setup with that super responsive sole plate and fairly aggressive traction pattern. Overall, a really great setup for a high-end speed boot. However, despite having the same base, there is a difference between these two boots when it comes to weight, which doesn't necessarily translate into better performance, but definitely a noticeable difference in feel. Both in the same size 9.5 US, we're gonna throw them on the scale. Starting off with the Crazyfast.1, you can see that they weigh in at 6.9 ounces, the equivalent of 195 grams, whereas the Crazyfast Plus weighs in at 5.95 ounces, the equivalent of 169 grams, making the Crazyfast Plus by far the lightest pair of football boots on the market. And while a full ounce might not sound like a lot, given that this is definitely not a heavy pair of football boots, side by side, and especially on feet, the weight difference is noticeable, where again, the Crazyfast Plus, not just because of that more traditional U-throat construction and super thin upper, does kind of relate itself back to the days of the F50 Adizero, where those were boots that were all about being as light as possible. This is the first time in a long time Adidas has made anything even close to the OG F50 Adizero weight range. It's really your preference when it comes to the fit and feel on feet that I think should be the main deciding factor between Crazyfast Plus and Crazyfast.1, in that with the Plus model, it is refreshingly different compared to most other boots in the speed category right now, simply down to that more traditional U-throat construction. It makes putting the boots on and taking them off significantly easier, and the way that the upper wraps your foot because of this particular construction really does feel, in my opinion, more comfortable than what you're going to get from the Crazyfast.1, although it must be noted that comfort is very much a subjective thing. What I like about the Plus model is the thinner upper that's just a little bit less structured, feels like it isn't squeezing your foot quite as tightly. It's wrapping your foot closely and has plenty of adjustability, but the predetermined shape is a lot less predetermined than the one-piece upper construction of the Crazyfast.1, where they're a little bit more snug through the midfoot and forefoot than I would personally like, not to the point that they're uncomfortable, but it has that more, I guess, familiar by today's standards, kind of squeeze your foot sensation that has become so popular in the speed category. And that really is something that needs to be noted, is that a lot of people really like this type of feel that comes along with a one-piece upper construction. It's just a matter of determining whether or not you are also one of those people. From a width perspective, I definitely think there's a little bit more width associated with the Crazyfast Plus. It just has more ability to open up because of that traditional construction. Not to say that the 0.1 is a narrow fitting pair of football boots, regardless of which one you go for. If you have super wide feet, probably not a great option, but if you like that snug overall fit and you've worn Adidas speed boots in the past, both of these should fit you quite nicely. And as far as sizing is concerned, I'm wearing both of these boots in my usual size 9.5 US, and the fit and the length is perfect. So regardless of which one you go for, I would strongly recommend going true to size in order to achieve the best possible fit. So in conclusion, there is not a bad choice between these two. Both the Crazyfast.1 and the Crazyfast Plus are great top-end speed boots that do have similarities but also offer something different. In other words, if you like what Adidas has been doing in their X.1 offerings over the last several years, I feel like the Crazyfast.1 is a continuation of that and something that is going to feel familiar and in a lot of ways a big improvement over the Speed Portal 0.1 that they replace. Whereas if you were a fan of the F50 Adizero series, you really value having that U-throat construction and just general more traditional feel in terms of how the upper wraps your foot, not to mention the ultra lightweight feel that again we haven't really seen since the early days of the F50 Adizero, then you'll probably prefer the Crazyfast Plus. Objectively, there's not a lot that separates these two, but subjectively, things like fit and feel are noticeably different between them. It's just a matter of deciding what you're looking for in terms of which is going to be best for you.